Good morning, everybody. Happy Hump Day. Welcome to the Vault Excel. This is a two-part live pertaining to the Idaho 4 student slaying. There are new documents being released pertaining to Brian C. Koiberger. In this case, some improprieties on an officer. I do not have all the information. This is just being released, but we will chop up what we think is the issue. As I've been hearing different commentary from different sources, this may be a Mark Furman type business. Who's to say what this cop slash detective has done in his or her past? But we will chop up the said situation. We're also going to talk about the dismantling of 1122 King Road. How do you all feel about the house being demolished? Do you believe it should be demolished now, after a jury has been picked and they walk through the house, during the trial, or after the trial? Thank you for joining me. Let's hear what News Nation has to say pertaining to this subject matter.
That was a day that was observed by our senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, who was among the media representatives, staying across the street and watching, observing, but out of respect, staying quiet. Brian, that was such a difficult time. I had thought that all the items were brought out of the house, and here we learn that there are still more. Do you have any idea how they'll set up this next transfer of property?
Yeah, it was very, very sad, Ashley, just because we had been so into the investigation of the case at that point, and it was just a very human moment, and seeing the victim's items brought out. But you'll notice the U-Haul truck, which the police chief was driving, by the way, and it was police officers who were working the case who were bringing the items out, so it was emotional for them too. But you'll notice that U-Haul, it wasn't a very big U-Haul, so it clearly wasn't all of the items that belonged to the kids inside the house. It was just some of them. Which explains why there are more items in the house and why likely the families are going to want to retrieve some more of those items. So, couches, we did see the mattresses come out at one point, but couches, other pieces of furniture, all sorts of stuff. Again, you see how small that U-Haul was. You can just imagine all the other items that are still left behind there.
So, Brian, on December 30th, that was the day that Brian Koberger was arrested. Within hours of his arrest, his public defender, Ann Taylor, put out a request to stop all remediation, all cleaning. And at that time, I remember us seeing these privacy curtains going up, and it looked as though they were going to empty out, big items, and then that immediately stopped. But there were big items that were still unloaded. What was the progression of that? And what happened with whatever was taken out of the house after the video we just showed?
Yeah, so there was that initial time where you just saw where the chief of police backed the U-Haul in and they took out a number of the personal items and then returned those to the families. Then there was another time that they went to the house and started removing other items. The mattresses were really the most visual thing that we could see. They were putting them in the back of pickup trucks. They were really starting to clear out the house, or at least start the process to do that. And that is when they immediately halted it. The public defender asked for it all to be stopped, which is really, really interesting because they were in the middle of doing it and they just shut the whole thing down. Exactly what was going on behind the scenes was still sort of unclear. It appears perhaps the public defender wanted an opportunity to really look through the house before things were moved around too much. But all of that stuff, before they could get it out, was left inside, which again explains why they now have to go through this process now and remove all the additional items from the house.
Can understand that. I want to end our discussion just with an answer that the university gave us when we asked if this is officially no longer a crime scene, because we have not had that announcement made by the police that was it a crime scene and has the title transferred. And they kind of gave us a half answer, Brian. Do you have the letter in front of you, the executive director of communications?
Yeah, I have the quote here, and essentially they said that it is no longer a crime scene, but basically said the house has been fully transferred to the university, and we are able to proceed with our plans to demolish. At this point, all parties are aware of our intentions to demolish the building as quickly as possible. And obviously, you read the letter, so we know the families received that letter, but it is officially no longer a crime scene. You see it's boarded up. There's still a security car outside, but it fully belongs to the university now. They've said they want to destroy it by the end of the semester, and it seems that that's really like imminent at this point.
Hard to parse it. They didn't give us a really clear no longer a crime scene, but they did say we are able to proceed with our plans, which would indicate that it's no longer. Brian Enton, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you for watching.
All right, everybody, that's Banfield and Mr. Brian Enton. So how do you all feel about the house being demolished? That will be this spring, end of the semester. Should it remain? Naturally, the defense has every right to go through the house, see the layout, see the rooms, the entry points of the house as to defend their client, see the crime scene, what was left behind. But how do you all feel about the house being torn down before the trial starts? Because if the state attorney has gone through, investigators have gone through, the defense team has gone through the house, wouldn't it also be fair for the jury to be able to go through the house and get a visual of what happened inside of that house? Scary, of course, macabre, of course. But should they also have that same opportunity, instead of seeing just photographs and video of the outside to the inside, but be able to walk the property, see the property from all angles by foot, and be able to walk inside of the house and walk back out? Do they deserve that opportunity? 12 members of the jury. I think they do. As most of you probably noticed following this case, News Nation has gone to the scene and have been allowed access onto the property to get a visual of the house. Certain things are left outside that were out there at the time of the children's murders, such as a grill and beer cans, certain things. And I was kind of shocked that those things were still there. And I guess they wanted to leave everything as it was. But it was just interesting that News Nation has been given that opportunity. You can check the community board through the YouTube queue if you want to watch that said short clip of commentator being able to walk on the property, walk around. Naturally, it's gated up. It's fenced up. The windows are boarded up. So the security officers are working 12-hour shifts to keep the property intact and secured, as not to have people rummaging around and standing around looking and gawking and taking pictures. 12-hour shifts, each officer standing guard watching the house. Very interesting information. New information has been released pertaining to this case that may help the defense of a officer, cop, whomever. Do not know who he, she is, what they have done, not done, but improprieties of this person. And listening to Coffin Daffer, a retired FBI agent, speaking, saying this would be pertaining to things the person has done before the Idaho 4 case. So what has this officer done that's being investigated by Internal Affairs? Forging documents, redacting documents, falsifying reports, lying, taking evidence, planting evidence, not taking down information from witnesses, coercion of witnesses, people in a case. What has this person done? These are the things that I'm most concerned with when it comes to cases like this. The things that go bump in the night that can cause problems. As most of you know, there have been lots of rumors, stories, speculations. And I'd heard a little while ago, I think this year, something about an officer being dirty or something negative to that effect. I didn't get the gist of it. And as I said on my community board, I didn't dwell on it because I didn't want to go down that road, because there have been so many rumors and sources. And every time somebody goes to Banfield to talk News Nation, it's always a source close to the investigation. So as someone said, who is talking to tell that somebody's even being investigated by Internal Affairs? Because nobody is supposed to know except for the investigators that's investigating that officer or detective. So how did it get out? Naturally, small police station, people talk, whether you're law enforcement or not. But somebody's been talking, somebody knows something, somebody that's working either in the courts, the police station, or somebody's going out of the police station repeating things to other people, but somebody, plural, in this case, because I do not know who it is that's talking, has been mumbling about this and that, the people in the house, who said what, who saw what, who called 911. Now we got information about a cop being investigated. A lot of chitter chatter, but no receipts to anything. That's been the problem. And it's a problem for me because I don't put my Hancock on nothing unless I have a receipt. So now we have information about Internal Affairs investigating someone. Sorry about that, you guys. Very, very interesting information. Let's go to the next information pertaining to this court documents. Long-awaited Brian Koberger court documents released. This was uploaded 9 hours ago. Ms. Banfield has Coffin Daffer and someone else as a visitor on this panel to give their commentary. Let's see what they have to say.
We've all just been reading these very quickly in the last hour. What stands out to you?
Well, what stands out to me is the Brady-Giglio situation, but I don't think it's anything that really should raise everybody's eyebrows too much. Basically,
so wait, it's a formal term, Brady-Giglio. You understand it. People who have a law background, Garagos understands it, but the general population will wonder, what is Brady-Giglio and what's in the document recommending that?
By the way, my dogs are named Brady and Giglio. I want you to know that.
Okay.
So.
I do not doubt that. I do not. So, Jennifer, with that as just the halt, explain what that is, why there's a Brady and Giglio issue at all in these documents.
So Brady is essentially any information that is exculpatory. So exculpatory could be information that would help the defense's case or hurt the prosecution's case. And again, I'm talking just in layman's terms. That is the best explanation regarding exculpatory. When you're talking about Giglio evidence, you're talking about evidence that is unfavorable or could show lack of credibility on a witness. That all has to be turned over to the defense. So these are the two areas that we're talking about, and this is what's being raised. But remember, it's being raised by the prosecution. They're coming forward and saying, listen, we have an officer that might have these issues, and we want full disclosure here, and that's what you would expect.
Okay, so this is where Garagos, I think you should come in and tell me, I'm going to quote again, what's in that, Brady, and gig or jig, Giglio or Giglio? I've heard it both ways from both of you. Which is it?
I call the dog Giglio, so I'm going to stay, and his nickname is Jig, so I'm sticking with it.
Okay. All right, so in that, there is a quote, a confidential internal affairs investigation and an officer involved in the case. And all of a sudden, my head is going to OJ, where the defense seized on policing and attacked policing in any way they could, and it stuck with that jury. What are you seeing when you see that quote?
I had the exact same thing when I was texting with your producer. And she was asking about it. I was going to type, think Mark Furman, because if you've got, and to Jennifer's point, if it was just something that would impeach his credibility, that would generally be Giglio. If it is something that is potentially exculpatory, then that is Brady. And they called this Brady material, which leads me to believe that it's an accusation that this is something that has either been falsified or there's an investigation as to whether he's falsified. You normally see this with other complaints about excessive force and things like that. So I've kind of ruled that out. and focused in on the other area that we generally see, which is somebody has said that a officer has filed either a false police report or has testified falsely. There's an internal affairs investigation. That would be Brady material, especially if it was an officer who was an affiant on one of these warrants or an officer who collected some kind of evidence during one of these searches.
So Jennifer, how does this work? We're in the middle of this, right? Nothing has been public. There's no trial. There's very, very little information to go on. How are we already at an internal affairs investigation involving an officer in the case? Who would have spoken up? Who would have pointed him or her out? How are we already there?
Well, it's really important to point out that I don't believe this has anything to do with something that this officer has done connected with the Idaho investigation. This would be something that was done previously, something that was pointed out or that he was under IA investigation for, internal affairs investigation for previously. So this is a very important distinction to make, that there is no accusation that we know of that he's done anything that would be a Brady-Giglio offense regarding this case per se.
And
so Garagos, jump in with that and tell me, are they trying to say like, oh, there's an officer who had something on, the files that should have been turned over to the defense because it's the officer's MO prior to this whole crime happening? Is that what this is about?
Well, normally what you see now with kind of the advent of different, or the cases, is you will see what are called Brady databases or Brady disclosures, where the prosecutors, when they find out that an officer has something in his past, whether it's an IA investigation or whether sometimes you'll see where if you sue an officer and you get a judgment and for some particular reason, that has to be disclosed. So I would agree that it does not necessarily mean that it's an IA investigation in the Idaho case. However, if it is in a prior case, and that is generally what this is in a Brady disclosure, that can potentially be used in this case. And the reason that they can potentially use it is because they can cross-examine on it. They can ask other witnesses as to what happened. And just like you can use, Ashley, we've talked many times about 1101 or 404 type evidence of a modus operandi or identification to bring in other acts. You can do this in reverse with officers.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com.
All right, everybody. That's Banfield and her guests. Mercy, mercy me. O.J. Simpson case is the last case I want to think of pertaining to the Idaho 4. What has happened? What has this officer done previously, if indeed it's previously? What has he or she done? And naturally, we'll come to fruition pertaining to this case if that officer, detective, is investigating this case. So let's go to the first question. How long has this officer been investigated by Internal Affairs? How many infractions does he or she have? Has he or she been warned about certain things, or is this something new coming out? Who is the person revealing this information to News Nation? Because there are a lot of people talking in this case. So I'd like to know, who are all these sources that are talking and running to the news to tell them this and that? Now we have inside sources pertaining to Internal Affairs, which everybody knows. Nobody in the street is even supposed to know anything about who's being investigated. But naturally, the state and the defense should want to know these things, because it can hinder this case. Even if the person has done nothing negative or subversive in this investigation pertaining to the students and Mr. Koiberger, their past can be used in this case, especially if we're talking about forging any type of information, lying, redacting anything, coercion of witnesses, coercion of defendants, coercion of victims, planting evidence taking away evidence, falsifying reports, all the things you can be accused of, and naturally using force, excessive force. So what has this person been accused of? What are they being accused of? Is it more than one thing or one thing in particular? And if it's one thing or more, have they done it in this case involving the kids, investigating these kids? Because whatever it is, it won't be good, especially if it comes to something down to evidence, writing down fake evidence, taking evidence, planting it, removing it, losing it, revealing personal information in a case. So what are the infractions against this person? This is all we needed. This case is brutal just from the circumstances in which the children were murdered. And now you have an internal investigation, as you hear Banfield say, already. Right, already. This is something we don't need. The state definitely don't need it. Because you want everything to go smoothly so the defense won't have anything to use later to get a mistrial for their client. And it looks like this is where this could be going. If it's something subversive that a cop has done beforehand and they're currently investigating the Idaho 4 case. This ain't good. Now, Coffin Daffer said we shouldn't be worried just yet, but why wouldn't we be? Because we've seen what has happened in many cases with people who have harmed others, killed others, and they have gotten off from technicalities. Now, naturally, we're talking about 4 people brutally bludgeoned to death, evidentiary material pointing to the suspect, Koiberger, something you can't erase and you can't deny. He can anyway. And we do not know what else they've gathered against Koiberger in this case, because that has not been revealed. But what you don't need are extra parties sabotaging the case. Witnesses, people coming in, making up stuff, lying, fabricating stories. That's what you don't want. Then when it's time to go on the witness stand, they freeze. They don't want to speak. They don't want to talk. They change their version. And I got a feeling some of that's going to go on in this case, especially pertaining to the young people who I believe have been the ones sending information to News Nation pertaining to what happened in the house on the morning that the phone call went in. I do not feel good about the 911 call. Because depending on how many people were at that house on that morning, in the house, when the officers and the ambulance showed up, are all these people going to be reliable when it's time to testify? The 2 survivors, will they be reliable? Believable? Interesting information. And I'm very curious to what this officer has done. Because I pray it's nothing as falsifying documents, falsifying reports, coercion of witnesses. That will be jacked up. Because as they said, it can be used in this case. If there are any improprieties on this person as far as using and doing things, misgivings they don't have any business doing. And as I said, so many rumors pertaining to this case from the start of who was the suspect, wasn't the suspect, how the person got in the house, left the house, who was involved, not involved. And in the end, it was none of the things that you thought, because that's usually what happens. And sometimes what you think happened didn't. Who you think is the killer, it ain't. That's why I never pointed fingers, because these are college students and they knew a lot of people. They came in contact with a lot of people, and there was no way I was going to point the finger at anybody because, one, I didn't know the kids and I didn't know their friends, and I still don't know their friends. I really don't know anything about the 2 that are surviving. I don't know anything about them. So I couldn't dare point my finger to say, yeah, this person's involved, this person ain't. But look what happened. Some bloke from East Coast going to school 15 minutes away in another state, is the alleged perpetrator. Didn't know the kids from a can of paint, but found his way to Moscow and stalked these kids and brutally killed them in their own house. You're going to hear a lot of things from News Nation pertaining to this case, Mr. Kohlberger in particular. He's lost weight, allegedly. News Nation is the source. Perhaps he doesn't like the diet, as Enton was like, oh, well, it's the jail. I kind of laughed at that because it was funny. Yeah, it is the jail. And you can either eat the food or don't eat the food. Somebody's also been taunting him in the jail that just got in there, a guy. He's threatened to kill him. And then he's also threatened the guards by saying, I'll have Kohlberger kill you all, quote unquote. So they've moved that guy. Probably just a nut, drunk, somebody that gets high. Nonetheless, I don't see anything happening to Kohlberger in there because I'm sure they're going to keep a mindful watch on him as so nothing happens to him before going to trial. As for his diet, I could care less. What he's watching on TV, I could care less. I just pray to give him enough food to eat so he doesn't pass out in there. Because we want to make sure he stands trial wholly, fully. Now, as for the house, naturally, they would have probably shown us them bringing out more things out of the house for the past couple months. I never really gave it another thought about what was left behind at the house, but obviously there are more items that were left behind. The university has custody of the house now, so they want to go forward with demolition soon. So what all is left behind in the house? Because naturally, if there are anything, plural, contaminated, I don't see the parents, relatives wanting those items, such as bedding, those type of things, anything that's got, blood splatter or whatever. And I'm sure it's very painful to have received some of the items from the house, because that's all you have now of your children. And I would see it also being hard going in there, getting the things out. So I'm wondering if they'll let them go in themselves, because I believe they're going to take they're going to take those items and take them to a secure place and let them decide what they want. So I don't know if they'll let them get the things themselves or they'll bring them to them, because I do remember in the last live I did, they said they weren't going to have any big items taken to the secure location. This is a travesty. And it just goes to show you don't know people. I've been watching a TV series that's a few years old on Tubi called A Crime to Remember. And it's crimes that were done in like the 60s, the 50s and the 60s. And in watching this TV series the past couple of days, it just hit me, the world has just been tainted from the moment Adam and Eve ate from the tree. Their children were tainted. Cain, Abel. And it shows you from day one, earth was made, two people in the garden, and all hell broke loose thereafter. Because they did something that we're told not to do. And listening and watching these crimes from, 50 plus years ago, when people were supposed to be, well-rounded, family-oriented, Christian, they were messed up. Doing things that you wouldn't even think somebody would be doing in the 50s and the 60s. And I've watched a few episodes, and some of the crimes are just as heinous as the crimes you hear now. Adultery, gambling, fornication, homosexuality, bisexuality, everything you could think of. Murdering of children, family members, greed, lust, jealousy. All of the same things that go on now. Such as whatever led this thing to 1122 King Road. He didn't know these kids. They weren't his friends. He wasn't dating any of the young ladies. He wasn't friends with Ethan. But he found some type of fascination and then hatred. Because in the end, it was hate that led him to that house. Perhaps he was enamored at first with one of the girls. But I believe the fact that she did not respond, whichever one it was, it pushed him over. And there's nothing wrong with being attracted to someone, but you have to have boundaries and know your place. That when he or she does not respond, leave them alone. Even if you've had dealings with them, when they don't want to respond, they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to return messages, texting, you do need to just leave them alone. Because by law, they can consider it stalking. You keep calling a person, talking, messaging, texting, whatever. Hey, talk to me. Why won't you respond? And a stranger should know better. You've had no dealings with these people, so you didn't have any business continuously messaging. If indeed he did that, I do not know. And I believe possibly that's what set Kohlberger off, if indeed he is the perpetrator, which I think he is. But to have something in you to go as far as messaging, collecting photos, pictures, going to the house, going to their jobs, or going to where they go to school, how in the world do you consider that normal? And I'm sure there have been many people who've done it. They wanted to get close to a person. They wanted to get to know a person. They wanted to see what they were about. They go to places they frequent because they just want to be near them and around them. But you have to tell yourself this is not normal behavior. Because it's just like what I said about going past the store window, looking at the dress in the window. How many times are you going to go by the window and keep looking at the dress? Eventually, you're going to want to go in the store. You're going to want to touch the dress. And you're going to want to try it on. So this obsessive behavior, stalking, it's the same. How many times can you drive by someone's house? How many times can you sit outside the house? Sit outside the job? Walk around the campus, drive around the campus? That's not going to be good enough. And that's what happened in this case. It wasn't good enough for Mr. Kohlberger. He had to touch the victims. Was there only one intended? I don't know. The others were casualty of war, happenstance? I do not know. But the point is he killed them, whether they were intended victims or not. And frankly, he had no business there at that house because he didn't know these kids. And somewhere in his sick mind, he had a God complex. And he stole these kids' lives for nothing. And you have other Kohlbergers walking around, sadly, who are just as evil and vindictive. They can't have their way. They want to lash out. This is why I tell you have to be careful of your surroundings. Who you talk to, things you post, information you tell people. Because you don't know who's watching you, who's lying in wait. You have to make sure you keep your home secured, your doors, all of that. And I thought about that when I was listening to News Nation. Go to the house and point to the door that they believe he entered, which is a glass door. It's boarded up and it's got it fenced up. Just listening to the commentator speak, it was scary. Because in my mind, I'm thinking it's late morning rather, and this thing walked in this house and made entry into this house. And it's like, how did he get in if indeed he went through the glass door? Why was it not locked? You have to have your house secured. Can somebody jimmy the door? Jimmy your locks? Of course. That's why you've got to try to keep it secure as possible. Doorbell cameras, security alarm. So if somebody does breach your door, an alarm will sound. Because when you are asleep, you don't know that somebody's breaking in your house, breaking in a window, especially if you're sleeping hard, deep sleep. And if you can sleep through a storm, you can sleep through somebody breaking into your house. Now, were any of these kids asleep? I do not know. And we're never going to know unless he decides to tell the truth of what happened when he entered the rooms of these victims. And I don't see him telling the truth no time soon. I've always said that the only way you get the truth out of Kohlberger would probably be after all appeals have been exhausted. He realizes that he can't go before the judge for another trial. He would then tell the truth about his obsession with the victims, and how it came to be that he made it to 1122 King Road, broke in that house and killed those kids. But it won't be anytime soon. Because he's got to get something out of this. He's already killed the kids, but he wants to see what they have against him. He wants to see the technicalities play out. He wants to hear the people testify. This will be his crowning glory. It's to be in the courtroom, numb as you know what, listening to people cry, scream, moan. It won't matter to him. He wants to see what the state has against him. That's why he gladly transferred back to Idaho from Pennsylvania. He had to see what the state has on him. Should the house remain intact until after the trial? Give me your opinion on that. How do you feel about this new information of one of the cops involved in this case being investigated by Internal Affairs? And as I said earlier, how long has that officer been investigated? The start of this case or beforehand? And as Coffindaffer says, she believes it's beforehand. He's done something, or she has done something before the Idaho 4 case. But the point is, if you're investigating this case, it can come to light. And as I said, if it's something really grimy, such as lying, false reporting, falsifying documents, coercion of witnesses, victims, whomever, this won't be good. And especially when it comes to collecting evidence, let me make that clear. If indeed this same cop or detective collected evidence, spoke to witnesses, people in this case, and they've done improprieties in their other cases, this will be a hot butter mess in the Idaho 4 case. Because if this person is not a truthful person or has been accused of not being truthful, then everything's going to be into question. What was gathered, the transferring of information, evidentiary material, chain of command, so on and so forth. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $McAngie, 129 Cash App, all stickers and chats are welcome during my live. I'm going to cut this live short, but that's my said commentary pertaining to the Idaho 4 case. New documents have been revealed pertaining to an officer being investigated by Internal Affairs. Do not know if it's a he or she, how long they've been investigated, what they're being investigated for, and how it will play a role in this case pertaining to the students. Will it help the defense or hurt the defense? Will it help the state or will it hurt the state? And also, the house has been transferred from the owner to the university. The university wants to tear this house down by the end of the semester. April 1st will be Saturday. Should the house stay up? Should jury members get the chance to walk through this house, look through this house, the property, or should it be torn down? And also, what should be put in its place? Another building, house, duplex, memorial garden, what should be in its place? Please go to my community board, for the latest breaking news, updates to stories and updates to this case, and also sending personal prayers to Nashville, Tennessee, which is just a little ways from the Queen. Prayers to those who perished in that schoolhouse, and also prayers to the young lady's family, because I'm sure they're very, very shocked to know that their child walked in that school, a grown woman, but still their child, and murdered those kids and the faculty and staff. And that's another thing. Doors locked, but you see that girl made her way into that school. Because that's the whole point. If a person wants in, they will get in by all means necessary. Alarm, cameras, steel doors, whatever. Whatever way they can get in, they'll get in. And she proved that. Allegedly, mental problems, seeing a doctor, legally bought her weapons, and she murdered these people in cold blood. Very sad story. Goes to show you it doesn't matter where you live. You have a lot of people who are very unhappy, very bitter, very tainted. The spirits are tainted. And you don't know the hour that you're going to cross their path. And it is believed that she had an itinerary. She was going to go to a mall and had some other family members on her list, which is very scary. And her parents should be petrified to know that she had other family members on a hit list. And what would be sad to know that they were on it. So who all was on the hit list? And I don't know what would possess her to think she was going to make her way out of that school to go terrorize some other people. And I want to thank the Nashville Police Department for intervening in a timely fashion and making way into that school and taking the suspect down. 14 minutes. Not like that mess that happened last year in Texas. 1 hour, breaching a door. Children mangled up, teachers mangled up, dead. Nashville, Tennessee, 14 minutes. And I want to thank them for their bravery to go in there to preserve and save lives. Prayers to the families, to the community, to the school. This is very hard to digest. And this is an epidemic. And yes, the gun is only in control by the owner. But we have a lot of people who don't have any business with a gun, any type of weapon, because they're not mentally stable. And it doesn't matter if they have a clean background. Your mental state is what controls the weapon. Do we need heavy artillery? Possibly not. But this is why they're allowing the guns to stay on the street, because people hunt. People like to use them for sport. And as many politicians are saying, we do not want to take away people's Second Amendment right. And maybe one day I'll come back and we could discuss gun control and this epidemic of people grabbing weapons to go on mass shootings. Once again, prayers to Nashville, prayers to the victims' families, the school, the church. And I'm also fearing the fallout of these deaths, what's going to happen to the church and the school. Because I won't doubt somebody will probably decide to file a lawsuit. That's usually what comes next. Thank you all so much for your time. You all have a wonderful week. I will be getting back with you all with my Chicago story. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind. I've just got a lot going on right now. But I'm going to come back and try to bring you that story as soon as possible pertaining to the deaths of these young men who have been found floating in bodies of water in the Chicago metro area. It's a very interesting story. Some people don't believe that these deaths are connected. Maybe possible suicides. Could be. I don't know. But we will dissect the situation and go forward. Thank you for your time. When I get more information pertaining to this case out in Idaho, I will bring you an update. Anything I don't discuss pertaining to this case, I will post it to my community board via the YouTube queue. You have been listening to The Vault XL.